Hi guys, and welcome back to Pass and Move. And for today's episode, we are here with an experiment. So it's going to be all about Jose Mourinho and Pep Guardiola, of course, Manchester City and Manchester United. We'll have a look at it. I've already simmed to the 31st of May 2018, the end of the first season. Of course, I don't want to go into the transfer window because then that means, they'll be given another opportunity to sign players, I suppose. But yeah, I think this is pretty much the first experiment, so let me know what you would like to see, what you haven't seen, for example, or any tips and advice. That'd be greatly appreciated. In terms of the experiment itself, it's going to be all about the two managers that we mentioned, as well as the two teams. We're going to be focusing on how Pep Guardiola would have performed at Manchester United and how Mourinho would have performed at Manchester City. It's been discussed so many times. They've been given just the season's time of worth, literally just the second season, so both managers haven't had the opportunity to actually build their team in a sense. They kind of have to deal with the players that they've got currently. I've even set the rule where they're not allowed to sign any players up until, of course, the January transfer window, but the initial June window that they have at the start of the season, they're not allowed to sign anyone, so they have to deal with the players that they currently have in the squad. And it's just an opportunity to see how they would have performed, how the game thinks they would have performed. Of course, if you've seen this a million times, you might get different results, but this is the first time, and we want to see how it would have went, potentially at least, to give us a bit of an idea. So, you can quickly skip all this. Try and have a look at the Premier League. I've used the in-game editor to just transfer both the managers to each other's clubs, and we'll get an opportunity. I want to go to the Premier League without having to see who actually won it. So there you go. So it looks like neither manager managed to win the Premier League in their first season. It looks like they've actually done quite poorly in comparison to real life, but it looks like Pep Guardiola did worse than Jose Mourinho initially. Just 4 points separating the two, though, so it's not really much of a difference. Pep just had one too many draws at Manchester United, and it looks like Chelsea just blew everyone away, really. The good news is Aguero's, I think, won the Golden Boot Award, and that's under Mourinho, so, props after everyone complaining that he's a defensive manager. But let's have a look. Let's see if we can find out some more details. So we'll start with Manchester United first. Pep Guardiola is still the manager. Of course, there's time to sack him. It's likely that would happen because I believe Manchester United's aims for that season are to win the title, and they probably only would settle for the Champions League. Of course, everyone wants to know what happened in terms of the transfer history, so there you go. He spent 43 million in the January transfer window, all three transfers made, the one on the very last day. Pep brought in Danilo Pereira, which is an interesting signing. It's kind of a Pep Guardiola signing in truth. He also brought in Dennis Mann, a youngster, a Romanian youngster, wonder kid apparently. Cuts in from both wings, which would probably make sense if he's an inside forward, and it appears that he's got the attributes for that. There is again another Pep signing, really. Mourinho tends to go for out-and-out wingers more so than an inside forward. And he's also gone for another left-back, an experienced one, I suppose. Not a bad choice, but he did have Shaw, of course, at the club, but I guess he wanted to go for a bit more experience in that squad. In terms of the players he let out, just a bunch of loanies, and he just sold Rojo in the January transfer window, and that was kind of it. And it kind of makes sense considering the abundance of centre-backs that United have. I believe they have 5 centre-backs. I think we also saw that they had a future transfer window, which is looks like Zlatan's joining a Russian team, Moscow, on the 1st of, basically tomorrow in terms of the game. So that's another interesting one to see. But yeah, let's have a look at the players themselves. I'm not sure if this counts as his key players, but this is the players that he played for his last match. He's listed Blind. Zlatan's on his way out. That's not really a surprise considering their history. Darmian's been listed. Chris Smalling's been listed. And that's kind of it. So he's gone with apparently what looks like a 4-3-3 standard Pep formation. That's not too surprising. But yeah, we can have a quick look at some other things as well, like selection info, for example. So he heavily relied on De Gea, of course, Pogba, Mata, Lindelof, Herrera, as well as Sanchez, all making 40 plus appearances. So that's not too much of a surprise. They are the core players of the United team. Perhaps even Mourinho would have done something similar. But in terms of goal scoring, Rashford, Lukaku, Sanchez, Pogba and Martial all on double digits. But you have to say no one's really a true outscoring goal scorer in this for Pep. No one. Sanchez, you could say, had a decent return. Pogba for midfielder, very decent as well. You'd expect him to get more assists though. Martial, that's not too bad for an inside forward, but really no one in the 20s and above is quite telling. The average ratings, you got Sanchez, Mata, Matic, quite a decent number of decent performers in truth, but he definitely could have done better if you ask. I'm pretty sure Pep would agree the same thing as well. We can have a quick look at their schedule as well to see. I've forgotten how to do this. That's right there. Wow, I'm basically blind. Alright, so they lost the Super Cup to Madrid. That's kind of expected, I suppose. But after that, some decent results. Leicester, Southampton is a draw that they would be disappointed with. Champions League, they seem to do well. We can actually have a quick look at how they performed overall. So let's have a look all their competition. So the Premier League, we already know. The Europa Super League, Super Cup, they're always going to be runners-up, of course. Champions League knocked out by Barcelona, which was won by Barcelona, so that's not too bad. And I think quarterfinals was all that was expected. I think maybe the board also expects semi-final, actually. FA Cup knocked out in the 5th round is really poor by Crystal Palace. And the Carabao Cup, or the League Cup, I suppose, won by Chelsea, but they were runners-up. So again, Guardiola really doesn't have too much to save from underperforming at Manchester United. We can go back to the schedule and see if there's any key results, but bunch of draws. He hasn't actually suffered his first loss until he faced Jose Mourinho's Manchester City, where De Bruyne and Delp both scored, and Pogba got sent off in the first minute, so that's amazing to see. He also lost against his former side, which are Bayern, in the Champions League, but that's still the group stages, so it's not too much of an issue. But a draw against Liverpool, not too great. A win against Arsenal, that's decent, but probably expected at this point. Draw against Chelsea as well. He hasn't done too poorly against the top sides, I suppose, but a bunch of draws, of which Mourinho was accused of being poorly against the top 6, and it looks like Guardiola was doing that here in the game at least. Burnley, Newcastle wins are expected. Crystal Palace, another loss. That's quite disappointing. They seem to be their bogey team by the looks of it. But again, a bunch of draws, some of them even at home, against teams that you'd expect them to win against. So not good to see. Wolves in the FA Cup, a League Cup against Brighton. We already talked about how that eventually ends. Another loss against Liverpool. Arsenal, a draw. Managed to beat PSG in the knockout stages, so that's not bad at all. And the FA Cup, like we mentioned, losing to Crystal Palace again. And they also lost against Manchester City again, so that's the double. That's probably the difference between them two in terms of the results in the league table. The point difference could very much have just come down to their the two fixtures they have. Rashford scored to give them the opener in the 4th minute, but Silva and Jonas, scoring in the 79th minute to complete a comeback win at Manchester City for Mourinho. Draw against Burnley is bad, and this really bit of form here is probably what costed them as well. Losing 2-1 to Barcelona over both legs is not too bad. I mean, that's 4-2 overall, but 2-1 in both results. Sanchez and Lukaku scoring. Chelsea also beating them, and then Newcastle very much could have decided the title as well as decided their position, and they managed to beat Tottenham there as well, so it's not too bad. But 5th has to be considered a poor result for Pep. But you have to bear in mind that neither manager has had the opportunity to completely create their own side, but that's kind of the point. Everyone always tries to say, what would Pep do at United and what would have Mourinho done at City? And they have to deal with taking over a squad that's not necessarily theirs. But it would be good to see how they would eventually perform. But at the moment, Pep would probably not even remain at Manchester United, I would assume at least. I think that's kind of it for United themselves. We can go have a look at City now. In 4th, their expectations were probably to win the title as well. If I have a look at the season preview, I think both Manchester clubs are 1st and 2nd. There you go, with City expected to win it. But I'm talking about the board themselves. I'm pretty sure the board of Manchester City will be expecting the title. But Champions League football may just about save Mourinho. So Kompany's the captain and Silva's the vice captain. Let's have a look at Manchester United. I think. Yeah, so they kind of just kept the actual captains that they had before. If we have a look at Manchester City's squad in depth as well, so let's have a look at their overall competitions. Managed to win the FA Cup. Mourinho's City knocked out by Atletico Madrid, which is a bit disappointing. You'd think they could go further. And of course, the opposition they faced was a bit difficult, but still, you'd expect them to beat Atletico Madrid, I would think. League Cup knocked out by Brighton, not the greatest, but again, League Cup probably wouldn't matter to the board. But again, could have gone on and won it themselves. So at least they have a trophy in the bag in 4th place, Champions League football. I think the City board would hold on to Mourinho. For a second, I wasn't even sure if he's still at the club, but yeah, he is. So both managers survived the whole season at least. But in terms of City and the squad they've got and what they were expected of them, Mourinho in a sense underperformed, but I still wouldn't think that he would be moved on. I'm pretty sure City would be giving him another season, another opportunity to try and win the title. But you could argue a case for both managers being fired in truth. Tactics would definitely be a standard 4-2-3-1 for Mourinho. There's no difference. So both managers sticking to what they love from their tactics, and you can get an early opportunity of seeing how they might have been set up. But a lot of Pep's players are not necessarily too suited to Mourinho, so I guess he's done fairly well. But again, you could argue either case for both managers being fired. So have a look at overall appearances. Silva, De Bruyne, Sané, Ederson, Otamendi and Walker, as well as Aguero, even Mendy actually, have all been Mourinho's key players, you would say. 40 appearances plus is quite telling. You can even go all the way down, to be honest. So yeah, they were his important players in terms of average rating. He's got the likes of De Bruyne, Silva also being a really key player for them. He's kept David Silva as an attacking midfielder, and you would assume, if we have a look at Kevin De Bruyne, we can actually try and figure out where he's played the majority of his games. Is that in form? I always forget where it is. Stats, maybe. I know there is a way to figure out where he's played most of the season. Doesn't really... Alright, there you go. So he's mostly played as a central midfielder. So Silva is the one who's been kept as an attacking midfielder, and De Bruyne's been dropped by Mourinho. Probably comes deep for the ball is what Mourinho's worked him for, and I would guess that Mourinho's played him as a deep-lying playmaker in that role that he likes Pogba to try and play in. And with Fernandinho there to win the ball back, that does really sound like, or try and hold the defence a bit down, a bit solid. Does sound something like what Mourinho would do, central midfielder mostly for Fernandinho. So yeah, average ratings a little bit better, but not that great. Kind of similar average ratings for Mourinho's men as well. In terms of goal scoring, though, at least he does have a double-digit goal scorer, 20-plus goal scorer in Aguero, who's clearly the key man. But in terms of overall double digits, not too great from his goal scorers. A bunch of assists at least. Kevin De Bruyne having an outstanding season with double digits in both goals and assists. The same can be said for Bernardo Silva, who United were rumoured to be in for before City signed, actually, in real life. Double digits for Jesus, but you could say that he didn't perform too great. You'd expect a little bit more from him. He's been played mainly as a striker and occasionally on the wing and anywhere across the front four, in truth, for Mourinho, but mainly as a striker, so you'd still say he should be getting more. But in terms of his appearances to goals ratio, quite decent. He's had 17 starts. You can't really expect too much from someone who's been a substitute mostly. So it kind of makes sense, I suppose. But either way, Mourinho's tried to get the best out of his key players, and in that sense, that might have helped him a little bit more than what Pep did, which is kind of spread the tasks around. So Jesus is unhappy because he wants a new contract. I thought he'd be unhappy with his game time, but apparently he's okay with that. His status is a first teamer. Delph listed, and that's kind of it. It looks like Mourinho's quite happy with the majority of his squad. So if we have a look at the transfer history, which is basically the first thing we should have done, there's a player who's coming in, Dario Marisic, who's an ambitious wonder kid, apparently Austrian, very important player. Central defender who looks like he's a ball-playing central defender, so it makes sense that Mourinho's looking for him, but he does have a bit of an injury there. In terms of actual transfer history, he's brought in the likes of Jonas, Fred, Lozano and Giovanni Dos Santos to bring up his bill to 70 million, which is more than Pep Guardiola, by the way. And in terms of outs, not too many. So it looks like Mourinho was in general very happy with his current squad. Only sold 1.7 worth million of the player. and Mix was the one to go, and it kind of makes sense in truth. But yeah, the players that he brought in, I guess very Mourinho players, but haven't played at all. I mean, Jonas is a 34-year-old striker, brought in huge wages, only made 8 total appearances, including, or actually not including the non-competitive ones, and just 5 substitute appearances. He seems to be a very decent striker in truth, a bit of a playmaker, and he's mostly played as a striker, but I don't know, it seems like it's a depth thing, but did you really need him? So it's a bit of a weird signing from Mourinho, and I mean, it wasn't too expensive. It's mainly Fred who's costed more, and again, hasn't really played, so it's a bit weird what Mourinho's done so far, bringing in players for a bit of a chunk of money, but not necessarily playing them. Even Lozano, who's a very decent 22-year-old midfielder, he's not like the other ones who are a bit older. He seems to be a very good player as well, a winger. He's made a bit more in terms of his appearances, but still mainly just used in the Europa League, and that's not too good. I think let's have a look. Actually, I think those Europa League appearances are for his former club, but yeah, mainly played as a left winger, either footed I suppose, but he's mainly a right footer and he cuts inside, so he is an inside forward. Giovanni Dos Santos is a very decent signing as well himself, but again, not really used. At least it's not too bad of wages. It's mainly Jonas that annoys me because he's on 185k and he's hardly played. So again, all 4 signings in truth are a bit unusual for Mourinho and don't necessarily make too much sense. But I guess halfway through the season, he could potentially use them more next season when he's let them bed in, I suppose. But still, to sign 70 million worth of players and not give them in total 50 appearances between them is quite weird from Mourinho. I think we already had an overall look at the current squad. We can have a look at the schedule though and see how he's done. So pre-season friendlies, kind of, quite similar to how Pep's Man United were, but he didn't have the greatest of starts. So he's a draw against Swansea, a loss to Chelsea, and a draw against Roma within 5 games. So Mourinho didn't have the best of starts. His form's more scattered than Pep's, so his side is a bit more inconsistent. Lost to the likes of Tottenham, drew against Crystal Palace, which is disappointing. Lost to Madrid, 4-0 is heavy, but it's not unexpected. And they got their revenge anyways here, 3-0 with, let's see who scored there, Silva, De Bruyne and Sterling. Not bad goal scorers there. So managed to beat United like we mentioned, Leicester in the League Cup, a loss against West Brom and Southampton's quite poor. Roma, they managed to bounce back, but again lost to Everton. Some strange results, to be honest, from from Mourinho. A bit worse than Pep. But he did get back-to-back wins against Liverpool and Arsenal, which might have saved him some time. A loss against Brighton was in the League Cup, so it's not too bad. But yeah, it looks like he started to pick up form about mid-season through, and was unbeaten for a huge chunk of time before he actually faced off against Tottenham. A 3-0 loss, Crystal Palace again being the bogey team, and Burnley a 2-2 result there as well. Huddersfield convincingly beaten Madrid. They allowed the 2 away goals, which were quite costly, I suppose, and Madrid won their home game. But yeah, draws against Stoke and West Brom unexpected as well, should be winning those games. Another win against Manchester United. They really go through bursts of form when it comes to Mourinho. Southampton, not necessarily huge wins here either, just kind of scraping by, but decent results nonetheless. A huge one against Brighton, another win against Liverpool. Chan getting sent off in the 3rd minute definitely helped Mourinho. Loss against Arsenal though, so it looks like maybe Pep had a tiny bit of an edge in terms of how he performs against the top 6 than Mourinho has. But yeah, I think Mourinho overall, his bursts of form helped him a bit better than Pep, I would say. And yeah, the FA Cup final against Liverpool, 3-0, Silva with a brace and Aguero with a goal, could potentially keep Mourinho in his job. So let's have a look at the actual Premier League and the stages of how it went through. That would be the last thing to just have a look at. I think it's past positions. So let's see City and United. So this is kind of how it looks like. United were quite consistent in their form, regularly remaining in the Champions League spots until about the 19th round of Premier League matches, and after that sort of dropped off and failed to recover. Meanwhile, Manchester United started off relatively poorly and inconsistent, but eventually managed to build a bit of steam, and it wasn't until this time here, the 34th match round, where they were actually back into Champions League spots and managed to hold on, because the first time around here they couldn't hold on. They did it fairly well for a couple of match days there, but then fell off and kind of just jumped about, I suppose. But you'd argue, you know, Pep should have done better considering how he was a bit more consistent. But Mourinho's team eventually managed to snip ahead at the last moment. Yeah, I mean, if you have a look, I think this is Manchester United. They're in fifth. Have I confused the lines? Is that my mistake again? So Manchester United were more consistent. No, I said that. Mourinho, yeah, could have sneaked by into third place as well. Let me have a look at that table again. Who's in third? Oh, Arsenal with just a single point. So let's see if Wenger's done well, I suppose. Chelsea, do they still have Conte? Yeah. And Tottenham done really well, but still 6 points off. Pochettino doing quite well himself. So it looks like if nothing changes in terms of the actual, you know, who's brought in and who's not brought in, these managers do a little bit better. Because whenever I seem to play in the Premier League, when everyone's allowed to buy whoever they want, this is a bit more jumbled and looks a bit more differently. Normally the titles, you know, kept between in the Manchester side of things, I suppose. Either City or United tend to win it. But it looks like once we've disabled the transfer window, the managers sort of struggled with the opposing squads. Maybe if we kept them in the current squads, they would have done better. That's more likely, of course. But not being allowed to sign their own players has seemed to affect them too much. But despite Mourinho signing a bunch of players to City's squad, he seems quite happy with it. It looks like it was actually Pep who's a bit unhappy with his own team. And I guess that's quite telling about the quality of the players on each side. But in terms of the football manager, both teams have very good players, so both of them should be challenging for the title. Liverpool in 6th, not the most surprising thing in judging Klopp. It's a bit surprising to see him still at the squad. I think it's because the season's not technically over. I mean, all the games have been played. This 31st of May. They still haven't, you know, gone into transfer window and all that sort of business. So you would potentially start to see managers being let off a little bit later down the line, and it would have been interesting to see who'd go and who wouldn't. But yeah, that's kind of it. So there we go. We kind of have the answer for how both managers would have performed in the second season of their respective clubs. It is the first season of them managing their teams, but it is the second season for both managers in terms of real life and how they built the squad. And it looks like City's one was a hint better prepared, and it looks like Guardiola wouldn't have done too well with United, and Mourinho would have been fairly decent with City, but both definitely underperforming. There's no doubt about that. Both were expected to challenge for the title, and I guess Football Manager coming up with a bit of a realistic answer, which is that until a manager's fully built his side, he's never really going to perform and get the results that he wants. So you know, it kind of makes sense how both managers are performing in real life as well and in the game. But yeah, I think that's it all for this Football Manager experiments. Of course, you know, if you liked the video, then please leave a like and comment in the section below your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. And of course, guys, as always, thank you all very much for watching.